evoking the 25th Amendment. The vice president has the responsibility to begin a conversation with the cabinet of the president to determine, in their view, and in good faith and their good conscience, if the president has the ability to continue to lead.
And we begin this week, as we always do, with Speaker Mike Johnson. He appeared on This Week on the Hill at Salem News Channel. And of course, he was asked the question that everybody's asking: what are we going to do about President Biden?
The conversation this week on the Hill is sort of naturally it evolved into this question about the evoking the 25th Amendment. The fourth clause of the 25th Amendment has never been used in our history, but we're in unprecedented times. And as that clause goes, the vice president has the responsibility to begin a conversation with the cabinet of the president to determine, in their view, and in good faith and their good conscience, if the president has the ability to continue to lead. If he is incapacitated in some way, lacking mental acuity, by way of example, that endangers the country, then they have a responsibility under the Constitution to take action. And they're not doing that, of course. They're doing the opposite. They've dug in to defend him. And we've, I think, rightfully brought this issue into the conversation. And you've heard a lot of House and Senate Republicans talking about that issue. I was asked the question, if you were in the cabinet, if you were serving in the Biden cabinet, which is a wild hypothetical because I'm in the different party and we don't agree on anything, but let's just say hypothetically you were there, would you, in good conscience, be thinking about evoking the 25th Amendment? And I answered instantly and honestly, of course I would, because I see what everybody sees. And then it doesn't believe anybody in that cabinet is going to do the same thing, but they asked me what I would do, and that was my answer.
So, Elaine, we'll start with you. These are unprecedented times, and we've never really faced this before as a nation. What is the speaker's responsibility here, and for that matter, the Republican majority?
I mean, unprecedented times. It's hard to tell someone who's in those shoes right now what they should be doing. And this is tragic from a family standpoint. I mean, watching a family go through this and have to deal with it, it is tragic because these are when people are going through dementia and they're being diminished like this, and whatever you want to call it, dementia, Alzheimer's, it's tragic to watch.
Yeah.
But from that standpoint, it's a tragedy. From the standpoint of the administration, the White House, the staff, the cabinet secretaries, and mostly the media, the American people deserve honesty. They deserved to not have a cover-up. They deserve to have true honesty if there was a problem. And many of us were watching it and saying, wow, I recognize that. I've got personal experience in seeing those kinds of things. And to not, to try to hide it, and the lengths that have gone through to try to hide this until they simply couldn't, is simply irresponsible. And I don't think the American people should forgive them anytime soon. In particular, I think the American people should hold the media responsible because they have a responsibility to report honestly to them, and so that we can all make decisions for ourselves. Because think about, if you were a Democratic primary voter, had you known, had you been getting the true story from the shows that you were watching, would you have voted the way that you did? I mean, that's the big question here. I can't tell them what to do. I don't know. I mean, I think that the Republicans really should just sit back and wait and see what happens and continue talking about the policies that they want to put forward that will help the American people. Because right now, the policies in the Democratic Party are an abject failure.
And in an election year, I don't think anybody expected a whole lot of major legislation to go through at this time anyway. However, there are affairs of state that need to be attended to. And the American people deserve to have a full-time functioning executive in that branch of government. Gabe, Elaine just used the word cover up. Is that how you would characterize what the media has done here? Because it's pretty amazing to see them pretend like they're just now noticing what we've all sort of noticed and talked about it for several years now.
Yeah, I would say in some respects, we're certainly seeing that the president has deteriorated significantly, right, since 2020, and in ways that I think we were all inevitably surprised by. I mean, he referred yesterday to the president of Ukraine as Putin, right? He called his vice president, former President Donald Trump. So I think, it's certainly surprising in some respect, the deterioration, but let's be honest, this is an extenuation of who we've seen the past 4 years. I mean, this is the guy who's been falling down stairs, falling off his bike, referring to European leaders by the wrong names. So I think that us in conservative media aren't necessarily as surprised as our counterparts in left of center media, or rather, they're not actually surprised as much. They just finally found the opportunity, and it's safe now to write all about Biden negatively.
Alec, you saw Speaker Johnson there sort of trying to delicately work through this. There are constitutional concerns here and certainly political concerns, but at the same time, it is a delicate topic to have to raise in such a brazen way that this man doesn't appear to be capable of doing his job. How does this register with younger voters, do you think? Is there sympathy here, or is it just sort of, let's get to work here and let's call a spade a spade?
Honestly, I think you'd have a hard time finding any young voter that has sympathy for any politician, really, let alone, a president that has so clearly lost a huge step. I mean, this is not the same Joe Biden as in 2020, maybe even the same Joe Biden as in 2022. He's just slipping so quickly down this road. And we've seen Dems, every time a Democrat is in trouble, the party typically circles the wagons around that Democrat really quickly. And that's generally what has happened since the debate. But now it's gotten so bad and so obvious that certain members of the party are starting to come out and they're cutting their support back. They're not buying it anymore.
Yeah, and again, listen, we've got much more to talk about in this regard throughout the rest of the program, but I will bring it back to Elaine here in terms of the affairs of state and things that need to get done. It would be nice to be able to see some cooperation on Capitol Hill and address some of the major issues that are still sort of plaguing our economy and dragging us down. From a job creators network perspective, have you sort of lost hope that anything's going to happen until after the election?
I think that that's a given, whether we had the issues going on with President Biden or not in an election year. You said it yourself, there's not much that's going to happen between now and the election. I think most people are looking at what can we do in a post Biden administration environment, and how can we get the economy back on track so that we're helping small businesses, so that we're bringing down inflation, making housing more affordable, bringing down the cost of gas, all of the things that have just gotten out of control under this administration as a result of the government overreach and the excessive and reckless spending that's gone on. I think that's kind of where we're at, is what do we do post-election?
Do you think there's stomach at the cabinet level, as Speaker Johnson alluded to toward the end of that clip we just showed on This Week on the Hill? Do you think that there may be a few cabinet members who are going to step forward and actually trigger something close to a 25th Amendment action?
I guess I'm doubtful that there isn't already conversations happening on a timing perspective on Biden stepping down. I don't think he's going to be the candidate as much as he wants to be and believes that he's the best person to govern this country. I think that he just hasn't actually accepted it. He's not going to be the candidate. The pressure is rising more and more. I mean, again, I'll go back to the media and holding them responsible. Now they're all admitting to it and acting in such shock of what they've seen, but they've seen this. I mean, Chuck Todd from NBC on his own podcast said 2 years ago he knew this, that a high-level cabinet official had told him this. So they knew this was happening. And this is something that's very hard to diagnose. I mean, it's just not something you just diagnose. And so what they kept saying was, these videos are being exaggerated and they're cheap fakes, and there's no proof because there's not a diagnosis. Well, of course there's not a diagnosis. I mean, I have family members that haven't been officially diagnosed, but my gosh, they have dementia. They have been diminished, and there are things that they can't do and handle for themselves anymore.
Yeah, it is interesting. The pro-science crowd doesn't recognize that observation of the data set in front of you is part of the scientific process, and we've all been observing this data set. But we'll see. That's a bold prediction, Elaine, that you don't think he's going to be the nominee. We've got more to discuss on this, but one thing is for certain. Ultimately, whether Joe Biden is the nominee for the Democrats or not will come down at this point, it appears, to one man's decision, and that's Joe Biden himself.